So I wrote out a couple pages of things I wanted to share, and I usually find that I never read my notes, and I just sort of talk extemporaneously. So let me begin by saying this has been a remarkable year in the life of our parish. It truly, truly has been. I met with Father David a little over a year ago when he asked me to be senior warden, and at that time we had a very newly printed 5-year and longer long-range strategic plan. And so we had this long-range strategic plan that was really exciting for all the things we were going to do, but we were also cruising towards the end of a 2023 budget year that wasn't fantastic. And so we had all these great ideas and vision, but not exactly the financial situation to move the ball that quickly. And we sat here a year ago at the annual meeting. I sat right there, Mike stood right here, and delivered that budget. And it was tough because we knew we had a tough path ahead of us. It was no longer than the very next day, which is when I technically became senior warden, that Father David and Nicolette, we met, and they said, you know, we just got the most amazing news, and we learned of the green bequest that very day. And I just looked at them and said, you guys are good. Like, wow. And so literally overnight, everything changed. That changed everything. And I think what's incredible about the green bequest is it basically allowed us to advance our long-range strategic plan by, I would say, about 5 years, because we now had the funding resources to do the things that the long-range plan talked about. And we put that plan into action. So in case you're not familiar, some of those things that we did was hire Steph Joe as our full-time Director of Children, Youth, and Families. As somebody who has many children, I'm excited about this. I mean, this is an incredible investment in the next generation of members at St. James. We added J.R. Ankney as Director of Worship. What that allows us to do, if you're not totally familiar, is it basically allows our clergy to be ministers instead of being event planners and production planners. And when you get behind the scenes and you realize how much of their effort goes into that stuff, which is really important, you realize they're not being ministers because as much as they could, because there's so many details that go on around running a place like this. So the addition of JR has allowed our clergy to really minister to the people, and that's really what we're here for. We also made critical physical plant investments. You may recall a year ago when the parish house was cold, when we wanted to be warm, and then last summer when we were in here and we were hot when we wanted to be cool. This is a place that just keeps knocking you down, this physical plant. It's beautiful, but it is expensive, and it is always full of surprises. And so, long story short, the Green Bequest was a transformative event in the life of this parish in the last year, and I think that we have done a really good job of stewarding those resources, and I like to think that Mr. Green would be very proud of that, because we not only put the money to use, but we're also doing it in a way that it's going to preserve the offspin of that principle for many generations to come. You know, saying that we want to be a school of prayer and service in the Lord is one thing, but actually doing it's another. In the last year, we've talked a lot at the leadership level about what does it mean to have that vision and then align the team around it and then execute that plan. And so that vision, alignment, and execution is what we've talked about a lot in the last year. And I'm really proud of the progress that we've made. I think as a parish, you may not see the work of that yet, because I think that's what you'll see in the year ahead, because we've been really working hard on laying the proper foundation of that vision and getting everyone aligned so we can begin executing. And I'm really excited as I kind of step back a little bit to watch that execution benefit us all in the years ahead. I would like to thank a few people and parties. For one, I think our vestry is an incredible vestry. If you don't know this group of people, you really need to get to know them. It is truly a dream team. You know, when you think about who would you want on your board, the talent that we have on that vestry is remarkable. Not only in the quality of it, but there's 100% passion for the mission here. And then the diversity of skill sets, where you have experts in communications, journalism, finance, HR, social services, philanthropy. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's experts in every area that this place needs. So we really have a dream team of a vestry, and it's just been a joy to work with them. Our staff, again, like if you don't spend a lot of time behind the scenes, you may not realize like how the sausage gets made. But let me tell you, we have an incredible staff team here, and they work really, really hard. They're extremely dedicated, extremely passionate, and they really are working with people at some of their highest and lowest points in their life. And I think that was the part that impacted me. You know, I have a business and I work with people, but I don't sit next to them when they die, you know, and the things that go on with us as parishioners, it's pretty incredible. And we just have an amazing staff team. Finally, I'd like to thank Father David. He has been so much fun to work with, and it's been an incredible opportunity and something I really treasure. When we sat down over a year ago, he sort of paid me the compliment that, you know, Gene, you're able to see the desert landscape, and I'm just sitting there only looking at each individual grain of sand. And I thought that was hysterical, because you can picture him looking at each grain of sand. And I think what I came to realize over the course of the year is, like, I'm really thankful that he looks at each individual grain of sand. You know, that's truly the work of a minister, and something that I think I can get better in my Christian life is, like, respecting and giving time for each individual grain of sand. What I'm excited about what we have going on right now is with Mother Stacy being here. She is someone who also loves each individual grain of sand, but can also help Father David when it's time to get out of the sandbox. You know, and I think that combination of them is a powerful combination. And it's the truth. So we really have visionary and integrating leadership at this parish right now, and I'm so excited about that. You know, so we've been here for 280 years on Duke and Orange. I think it's an honor and a blessing for us to be here in this parish, like right now. I'm really excited about that. Amazing vestry, amazing staff team, amazing leadership. You know, and I don't need to be here to be a Christian, but I think for me personally, I feel like this is the best place for me to grow as a Christian right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. I'm not even sure. You. All right. Thank you so much.
Fun to be in the sandbox. The great news of Gene's opening, his prayers, and those 5 great news stories in 2024 that I'm looking forward to sharing in a little more detail with you as I canter through the good news reviews and hopefully leave that time for the presentation of our budget and some questions and answers from you as well. You know that the first great news of our congregational vitality is our praying and our serving and our giving together. Our discipleship, our mission and evangelism work is all thriving and demonstrably growing. With over $1 million in pledges, offerings, and cash plate to our annual operations, we are continuing to see steady increases in giving from more people as a sign of their growing commitment to God and their participation in the ministries of this parish. The second good news story is of a renewed and refocused staff team to which Gene paid tribute with a greater span of skills. The renewed staff team and its skills bring more to our ministries and have of course cost more, much more as you would expect in an inflationary environment, but we will have had a third and fourth good news story that makes this investment in our core staff sustainable as we move forward for many years. That third good news story is, of course, the Clark Green multi-million-dollar bequest that has doubled our endowment this year and invested funds from $6 to $12 million, and we expect slightly more to come as his estate distributions are completed in the coming year. But without the fourth good news story of new membership growth and new member giving, then the gift of the Clark Green bequest could signal a curse if it led us to think for a minute that in order to grow as God is calling us to, then anything less then all that we have in our giving, praying, and serving were to be an option. With those endowment funds having doubled, they would begin to enervate rather than energize us. The 2025 annual giving campaign has proved that the Green Bequest is and must simply remain a galvanizing, inspiring, and empowering one that challenge us all to consider what more we can do, not what less we could do for the sake of the good news of Jesus Christ in our lives and in this place. Nicolette Norris, who directs our giving and finance, and Mike Schmid, our treasurer, and I will each add a little more detail to these stories, but let me rejoice in the renewal of this team and so many changes as well as our losses in 2024. Jean has paid tribute to that work of Steph Joe and JR. I will briefly touch base with Mother Stacy in that work of renewing focus for her of congregational care, faith formation, daily prayer, and social justice. Her energy and skills are a joy to behold and to work beside, as we are all discovering. And Mother Stacy, with Steph Joe and JR, will help integrate that multi-generational teamwork that, with our vergers, makes our worship happen hundreds of times each year through Altar Guild and tech teams and ushers and acolytes. Each of these groups need more of you and more yous to join them, and so it is that we hope to make that clearer and easier for you in the months ahead. That Clark Green bequest came to us quite literally from heaven, someone none of us knew who gave us more than we could ask for or imagine in that bequest of nearly $9 million. But let's think for a moment where that transformational gift began. It is really a children, youth, and families ministry gift that began 120 years ago with his mother's confirmation and first communion here as a girl in 1907. Clark Green, who never really attended church here, died in his 90s, but he gave his bequest both as a thanksgiving to his mother Mary and her role in shaping his Christian life, and in remembrance of his baptism at the back of church with his twin brother Richard, where as 5-year-old boys, when their father, remaining on active naval duty in Honolulu, was brought by their mother back to Lancaster for their baptism in the font in the 1930s. So in this coming year, in thanksgiving for those moments that shaped their lives, we will take a small portion of that bequest of his and design a more beautiful and practical altar in memory of his mother and a more devotional, mission-focused and flexible baptismal area at the back of the church to include what I hope will be a large icon of the baptism of Christ as that reminder of ours, of all that we are because of all that he is. As I said a year ago, before any of us knew anything of the Green Bequest, year to year we can adjust and survive financially because of you, but it is only because of estate planning and through life gifts and campaign gifts and campaigns that for capital that the larger scale historic ministries that with our ancient buildings and their constant maintenance needs are able to thrive for generations to come. How I, and I'm sure you on mornings like this, wish we were a church built in a former cornfield with a big free parking lot. But what is our historic campus inviting us to do is a ministry instead of national cultural conservation, prominent public witness, and a stake in urban renewal of statewide significance. These are obligations we have that bring pride and joy to us, and intending to, we ourselves can be justly proud of in return. Our churchyard in this campus is in itself a ministry, a blessing, and a burden to shoulder. This is why the relaunching of the All Saints Society is a membership body of those who have committed to the long-term vitality of this parish by remembering St. James in its will, as Cordelia and I have done in ours, is so crucial to the mission horizon and ambitions of this place for the generations that are to come. The ancient practice is that every Christian in their will should commit his or her soul to God and a portion of their estate to the benefaction of the Church of God, so that future generations will be blessed by your life, giving, and prayers. If you want to testify that your belief that death is not the end of your life is a reality, then please remember St. James in your will, and remember to tell Nicolette or Father Glenn or me that you have done so. Then we will meet with that All Saints Society to rejoice together on this shore and on another. I'd like now to invite Nicolette to, as our finance and giving team leader, share more details of the great news story which relates to our growth in new members and new pledges.
Thank you, Father David. If we could have the second slide that is in the slide presentation to start, that would be great. There we are. So congregational giving across the board, as Father David said, is now in excess of $1 million for the first time. It is an historic high for St. James. And 88% of this income comes from pledges. And that's why it's really important to focus on and give a little bit of a report on the pledge campaign. The campaign was so aptly named A Time to Grow by our philanthropy committee. And as you've heard from Father David, and you'll hear from in a moment from Mike Schmid, our treasurer, St. James is growing in astounding ways. I think where we see the real vitality in this congregation is in the number of new pledges. There are 24 new households making giving commitments for the first time. And many of those families have come to us just since COVID. In addition to that, you'll see that a third of our parishioners were able to give an increase in their giving, and by an average of 15%. So at the top, you see a total number of 213 pledges and sort of how they break down. At the bottom is just a pie graph that represents that. We have a steady 38% of households giving at their level of last year, 37% increased, and that 24 households is 11% of the pledge number so far for 2025. We also have a small number of pledges that are down, and then a small number called returning, because those are people that may just not have pledged last year or are coming back to us. We don't have a number for them for last year, so there's not a category to put them in, but we would never call them miscellaneous. So you'll see that the total pledge to date, that number of 864,697, and you may wonder why to date, and that is because we have not heard from everyone, and it is never too late to make a pledge, and as they say in public radio, no amount is too small. So if you think that you've made a pledge, but you're not sure, please check in with me or your Realm account, because we have an ambitious goal of 900,000 in pledges for this year. And as you can see, we have a little ways to go. Now, pledges naturally go up and down with people's life circumstances changing and with transfers out and moves and deaths. So if we could take a look at the next slide, we'll see a little bit of how those numbers break down. At the top, you'll see the number of for new pledges. So we have gained in new pledges this year that number of 66,570. You'll also see then coming down two lines that the increased pledges, the actual amount increase, not those total pledges, but the amount of increase is over $50,000. We lost in pledges that were down this year, 24,000 and change, and then for people who transferred out, moved, or died, we lost another 37,000. So as you can see, for every $2 in new pledges, we lose essentially $1 in transfers out, moves, or deaths. And in every $2 in increases, you can see that we lose $1 in decreases. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes to get to that net gain of almost 73,000. Finally, I have a housekeeping note for everyone who has a recurring online gift set up. You may think that that online gift is a pledge, but we don't count it as that unless you tell us to. So if you get to the end of January and you feel like nothing left your bank account, it is because we do not automatically roll over your recurring gifts. So do check in with your own Realm account or me if you have any questions or you're not sure that that is set up the way that you wanted it to be for this year. I'll close on a personal note to say that in May, I will reach my 10-year anniversary on this staff, and it has been a real joy to do the work that God has given me to do in this place, to have an up-close and personal view of your stories and your generosity every day. Such a privilege to know all of you and to see your generosity at work. Thank you.
As you'll see from our online annual report, our pattern of in-person weekend attendance is only slightly up across the year. I hope that is going to continue to grow as we bring full powers of our new worship team and newcomers welcome and ministry engagements into full effect. 2023 was a remarkable year of recovery from the effects of COVID, so it's no surprise that 2024 was only a slight increase. But our Christmas attendance this year was up 12%, and this is good and bad news, as it proves the point that while the number of people coming to St. James increases, the frequency of our attendance is often decreasing without a special occasion like Christmas. This is a wider socio-cultural trend that we have known about since books like Bowling Alone were written, and we were starting to identify our social atomization, which of course social media and COVID simply accelerated. But I want to remind you that the root of discipleship is discipline, and it is in that discipline of frequent and steady worship and prayer that we will grow more spiritually in our discipleship together. Our best attendance story is that our online attendance has grown significantly, perhaps by as much as 20% over the prior year. And I hope to improve the engagement opportunities for those who know us and love us well online, like Corey Cunningham in South Carolina, who actually came to be baptized among us, and those more like Joe and Barbara Betts at Willow Valley, and from so many other retirement communities whose membership and participation in the life of this parish happens in so many ways, but so particularly and especially online. So I want to pay tribute to our technology team and to the legacy of Chris Keeney, who worked so hard to keep us seeing and hearing in-house and online together. This is an illustration of how our members, from their teens to their 70s, make a massive contribution to our pastoral care, evangelism, and new member growth in the parish, as well as its worship. In this past year, we have had many staff changes and major investments in the buildings and grounds team, which the Green Bequest has allowed us to do in an accelerated fashion. And with this investment, we will track closely each dollar to ensure the return on that investment matches our needs and exceeds our expectations. I'm grateful to the staff team of the past year who have come and those who have gone. One of the highlights for me this summer was visiting Mother Shana in her new parish of Holy Trinity in Washington, where she is leading that thriving parish of historic Afro-Caribbean heritage in our Episcopal Church. We raise up new ministries among us and we send them out. This is our apostolic joy and burden and responsibility as we do our raising up, our bringing in, our letting go, and our sending forth each year. Discipleship and evangelism this past year is one of thriving breadth. Our growing men's group and renewed Daughters of the King, an online women's spirituality group, and an in-person Sunday morning women's Bible study illustrate this well, as does the completion of a third Sacred Ground Racial Justice and Reconciliation group and a fifth year of the Mercy Seminar and a pattern of regular retreats with growing numbers, all of which point to the importance of study and reflection in this parish as a school of prayer and service in the Lord. For the Urban Well this past year, it was one of growth and breakthroughs. The weekly gathering and first podcast series of contemplative citizenship connected with hundreds of people in St. James and Lancaster, and through extraordinary media coverage it received with many thousands around the country. In a season of fraught and politics and distressing political violence, St. James and its Urban Well ministries were seen as peacemakers in the world through active participation from Mississippi to Maine, from the Carolinas to California. Our new yoga studio and immense amount of juggling and wrangling work which Kate Brossman, as the director of the Urban Well, did to bring it online in a formerly flooded space with new programs and so many new participants is a triumph for her, the teachers who make it happen, Marianne Murata and Matt Henry, whose leadership of the Buildings and Grounds teams, all of which make the platform of our ministries possible. Our holistic and focus on mission and justice and peacemaking work that flows from the mission and committee of mission and justice is essential for any faith community, and having such a dedicated group on mission and justice is one of the treasures of this place, where contemplation and action are not alternatives to each other, but two essential halves of a healthy whole. It is no good just praying for the homeless if we are not ourselves sending people out there to build and repair houses in the midst of a housing crisis in our city and country. So it is that we partner with Habitat for Humanity to build and repair and renew properties in this city and in the rural reaches of our diocese, and mission trips together. Our biblically rooted commitment to refugees and to repairing the most painful chapters of our national history is evident in our work of welcoming the strangers in our land with our partnership with Church World Service. In a time of legitimate policy debate and priorities around global migration and southern border, unhealthy rhetoric around refugees, and the confusing and conflating of Christianity and nationalism will be theologically challenged and resisted here. In doing so, we will all, I hope, avoid any appearance of political point scoring or sectarianism, but I have worked and prayed in too many places of conflict to have a simplistic view of border security that is either categorized as liberal or progressive or conservative. Our national policies and political responses must be deeper and better than we have seen from any political party to date. And if we want to claim biblical foundations for our national ethics, then they will demand much better cross-party cooperation from our politicians, and we will play our part in supporting them and educating ourselves as we do so in the coming year. In the meantime, the organization that has worked in partnership with faith communities, including as a founding partner of the Episcopal Church since 1946, is Church World Service. Anything we can do to support and collaborate with them will be both an opportunity and a priority for St. James and its vestry in the coming year. To be able to gather at the warehouse as we did on Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a community day of action together with Church World Service was an ecumenical joy, of which I will say more in my sermon. That these partnerships include intergenerational service opportunities where individuals and couples and kids and families can learn and grow and laugh and serve and pray together is not just a joy, but the visible so what of the vital but often invisible spiritual work of church life and prayer. Please see that scope of mission and justice work in our annual report that is online. Mike, now with a sweep of the past year and something of the year to come, would you share with us as our treasurer that great care and stewardship with which you and Nicolette, the vestry and board of endowment trustees, and our accountants and fund managers have all worked together to achieve this past year, and what the fruit of your labors and all our financial givings has been?
Thank you, Father David. Good morning, everyone. Could we pull up the slide again? But for the presentation, let's go to the first slide. Following Jean's and Father David's and Nicolette's remarks, I'm not sure I really have much to talk about. They took all the thunder here. So if you have your hand out or you simply look at the slide presentation in front of you, I'm going to follow this presentation kind of left to right in a columnar type of direction. So if we look at the top line, that's the 2024 budget. On the left, the next column to the right of that is what we did actually, and the following column is what we intend to do in 2025. So let's look at 2024. That's that middle column. 2024 was a fantastic year for this parish, which has already been indicated. But it started with the green bequest. It didn't end there. I want to talk a little bit about the giving that this parish was, the giving that was given to the parish throughout the year. So couched in congregational giving is pledge and offering. Pledge and offering was up 8.5% for the year, above budget, which was just amazing. If we go down another line, which is called endowment managed funds, you'll see that we had budgeted $319,000. Jean had alluded to the green bequest and setting aside some funds for vestry managed funds. And we did do that starting in 2024, and we kind of have a 3-year plan here in which we are going to continue to draw additional funds from the vestry managed funds, that portion of the green bequest, to support operations. In 2024, we drew an additional $150,000 as part of that green bequest. The next line down is urban well, and then rental and miscellaneous income. Our total income was nearly $1.7 million. And again, if we look at that draw of $150,000, that in comparison to 2024 was about 1.5 million in 2024. So substantially up in terms of budget, substantially up in actual 2024. Expenses, everything was pretty much in check. We were under in personnel. Gene talked a little bit about the staff that we added this year, but most of that staff we added didn't come until later in the year, so we didn't incur those expenses in personnel until later in the year. And we did lose some staff at the beginning portion of the year. So personnel was in check. Operations was a little over budget. Remember, we talked a little bit about the heating issue, and then in the summer, the cooling issue. I'll get to that in a minute. Ministry was well under budget. Worship was over budget. That has something to do with bringing in guest organists, supply ministers. Total expenses was about $1.7 million compared to 1.6 million. It's right on budget. Our loss this year, we were looking at, when we budgeted for 2024, we were looking at a potential of a $200,000 loss. Our loss this year was $5,000, a negligible loss, well within budget. If I look at that overall overage in expenses, it's about $30,000. That is about what we paid to rent all that equipment to keep this place cool in the summertime. The 2025 budget is reflective of our vision. It's reflective of continued growth. It's reflective of additional personnel to support all this growth. If we look at the top line on 2025 congregational giving, that reflects what is pledged to date. Plus, we typically have about $100,000 that comes in on average over and above what's been pledged. If we look at the personnel line and expenses, it's about $300,000 over what we did, and we're looking at an additional draw out of the vestry managed funds in order to support that. All in all, for 2025, we are looking at an acceptable loss. It's within about 2% of the overall budget, of a loss of about $44,000. That does not mean we are going to incur a loss of $44,000. That means we are budgeting for that. I think that's really all I have to talk about. I'd like to take questions. David, yes.
I don't really understand why you budget a loss and think that that is a good thing. It really, you budget a $44,000 loss. Normally, when you budget, you try and get an even amount and what you're actually doing.
Right.
And it looks like you purposely budget a deficit. And it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, I think if
the income is wonderful
Right.
of the parish.
Sure.
I think that's great. Mm-hmm. But maybe the expenses here are overdone.
Right. Thank you for the question. The question is really about budgeting for a loss. If we look at, if I had prior years in here, maybe we should have, and we look at the losses that we actually incurred, they're pretty significant. And so where we are getting to, if we look at 2026 and 2027, is actually a balanced budget where we are not incurring losses anymore. Your point is well taken. I think as a vestry and as a staff, one of the things we need to do is make sure we are looking at expenses and managing to those expenses and finding ways that we can reduce our expenses and hopefully increase our income.
It's a joy to see the new faces, not only in the congregation and the staff. The only thing that really stands out as the largest change is the personnel budget. And I wonder if somebody could explain all of the new people who are coming in and what they're doing.
Sure. Father David, do you want to address the personnel?
Thank you, of course. Great question, and as you can see, the vast amount of the budget is a people budget. It's what we pay for that staff team that Jean spoke about, and among those increases this year have been a new and differently skilled set team that include Mother Stacy, Steph Joe Wise, as well as J.R. Ankney, both in roles that did not exist the prior year, as well as Lauma Akmane, who is also in a role that did not exist last year. And so that increase in that staff team capacity that was able to be planned for in the light of that long-range financial strategy and mission strategy of vestry, it was, of course, made possible to accelerate those recruitments because of that learning in February of the Clark Green bequest, and what would have been a multi-year strategy could be an accelerated one, backfilled by that support of the Green bequest. So that's something, I hope, Joe, of that question and answer for you.
So the basic question is how is the loss made up? And you might have said, is it from the managed funds?
Well, at the end of the day, St. James budgets via cash, so we're cash basis accounting as opposed to accrual accounting. So yes, we typically are flush with cash at the beginning of the year. We'll take one or two draws on the endowment throughout the year to cover any cash deficits, and then our cash declines every now and then sometimes we have to dip into our line of credit. Thankfully, we have not had to do that in the last couple years. But yes, if we have a substantial loss, typically we would have to dip into available cash, which would be like our line of credit. And that's how we would do it.
My question is on the diocesan parish assessment. Is the 155 that we paid in 24, is that actually in 25 the same, or are we going to be asked to contribute more in view of our increased income?
So as a vestry, we have voted to hold our diocesan assessment stable for the next 3 years. So what we paid last year is exactly what we're going to pay this year and next year.
Those are great questions and properly finance focused with Mike here. He is open to any further questions that you have in the coming days or weeks. Just email him or Nicolette in the parish office, and we'll be sure we get that answer back to you as we then continue to conclude together and any wider questions that you may have for the ministry and mission of the church. Mike, for all of your work, that of your team, and the skills that you bring to it, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but do you know there's a really important football game later today? Go Birds.
A further colleague of ours on vestry and whose skills and heart we would be much poorer without is Christopher Churchill, who is our chancellor, our legal advisor, and he and his colleagues at Barley Snyder are also part of the governance and care of this parish. I want to end by thanking those who have been exemplary in making their difference to this place, beginning with my own extended family, and especially those with whom I share the rectory, Cordelia and Theo. Thank you for your constant support of me and love, joy, and dedication to this parish every day that you share from there. I want to give thanks to God for the leadership of our vestry, ministry committees, and our staff team, through whose hearts and hands so much of the astonishing ministry of this place has been shaped this past year. And I want to thank the brave 8 who, in standing for vestry this year, stand tall among the leading members of this congregation, all of whom contribute so much to our congregational vitality: Barbara, Eric, Julie, Lisa, Michael, Rosemary, Sylvia, and Windley. I am delighted to announce that my new senior warden and yours will be Chuck Smith, and our new junior warden will be elected next month by vestry, as our bylaws set forth. I will close in my final thanks to those 4 members of vestries and their families who have served us all so faithfully and generously this past year. To Jean Clark, whose year as senior warden has been steadfast in dedication and radically generous in sharing his time and skill, together with John Hershey and Ginger Humphreys Robinson and Kit Slough. Their experiences of joys and sorrows in their ministries, as we all must, who give ourselves entirely to a community that is both imperfect and redeemed, as we ourselves are all imperfect and redeemed. Thank you, my dear friends, for your servant leadership of this great parish, and to each of you and its many members whose hands and feet are those of Christ in the world. Thanks be to God. Friends, there being no further questions, I can close, even 7 minutes early, the voting for vestry elections. We'll let people know in the coming hours this afternoon those results. But any final question on ministry, mission, or money? Yes. I need a microphone.
With that incredible bequest that we got from of $8.9 million, I really would hope St. James Church would consider giving a very, very significant gift, maybe $500,000, to the Episcopal Relief and Development for the California wildfires and other disasters that have happened in our country. I hope we can get some consideration for that. Thank you.
I will pass that to both Mission and Justice as well as the Board of Endowment Trustees.
Just one question. How many parishioners do we have on the rolls here at St. James?
It's a great question. I don't have the instant answer, but it is, if I had to guess, somewhere around 800. We are a parish that every year is very disciplined in trying to cull our active membership role, because I don't think it's helpful for us to have an inflated idea of ourselves or who is out there, but instead a focused and indeed intimate understanding of who we have to work with. And that is why one of the core goals of the long-range vestry plan is an increase in membership, and in that membership a much more disciplined approach to welcome and incorporation of people into our number, as well as we will continue to be sure that those people who have moved or drifted away are not considered and continuing as those, dare one say it, expectation disappointments. Instead, how do we build with each member ministry and engagement as a focus moving forward? But a great question, and we'll put that as a data point out when we do our annual parish report to the diocese next month. Any sense that 800 is wildly far of the mark? Yes. 800 individuals, which of course would include children as well as adults. Now it's 10:28. Thank you, Glenn. Bim Pickett may be the last one to get in.
I've never been accused of not speaking up.
The
Hopefully
online does.
Okay.
Thank
online
you.
does. All right. I'd like to refine that last question. I think a more relevant number would be the number of potential households to pledge. We saw the 213 that have pledged to date. How many households do we have so we know where we are versus the potential?
It's a great reflection, and what we are actually doing is our work of a dashboard, which are what are those key numbers that we should be shaping our own vision and mission and engagement with. And that is certainly one, as Bim suggests, which is not just the total number of active members, but what number those households represent, and then how that participation is shared and generated and galvanized in our pledged giving together, which makes all the difference. With that, let us thank God for each of us for the opportunity we have now to worship, and this annual meeting of an exercise in transparency, accountability, and vision setting complete. And with that, I close the meeting.